All right, hello. Welcome back to another Trek Talk live stream. This week, I'm going to be taking a look at Arena. This is one of my personal favorites. Arena was actually the first Star Trek episode I ever saw. I first saw it, I'm guessing it was 1974, probably might have been 75, and I would have been about 8, probably. And saw this thing, and I didn't know. I came into it in kind of after the beginning, so I didn't know it was a TV show at the time. I thought it was some kind of a movie, and I liked it, and didn't realize till the following week, the following Sunday, when I was watching, kind of flipping around channels, and there it was again, this show, and then I realized it was a TV show. But because of that, Arena has always been kind of a sentimental favorite of mine, even though I know in some ways it's maybe hasn't aged that well. But let me go ahead. And as usual, I'll be reading from Mark Cushman's book. These are the voyages. So, and this is also in production order. This is episode 19. I should point that out. So, from Cushman's book, this is from the TV guide for July 1st, 1967. The fate of the Enterprise hinges on the outcome of a personal duel between Captain Kirk and the lizard-like commander of an alien spaceship. On a barren asteroid, the unarmed Kirk must rely on his ingenuity to defeat a powerful adversary. The enemy is the Gorn. A space chase leads both the alien vessel and the pursuing Enterprise into an uncharted solar system, the home of the Metrons. There is a penalty for bringing a mission of violence to the doorstep of the superior Metrons. The captain of each ship must face off, pitted in hand-to-hand combat. The prize for the winner, the destruction of his enemy's ship. Arena offers an examination of prejudice and mercy. And Star Trek tricks us again. What appears on the surface to be a man versus beast tale is really man versus himself. Humankind, represented by James Kirk, is being tested. NBC finally got what they most wanted, a planet show with a monster. Gene Coon's brisk and colorful script pleased the network and delighted the fans. And Coon proved himself a writer who could both entertain and educate. Here, Kirk is taught an important lesson regarding his own prejudice. And as Kirk learns, so do we. Watch for the change as the captain, bent on revenge, having admitted to a natural revulsion to reptiles, learns empathy and comes away from the battle certain of one thing: he is not qualified to judge the actions of these creatures nor dispense justice. Arena has not aged as well as other Star Trek episodes. The Gorn mask, so startling in 1966, will conjure up very little fear today. And the ominous voice of the Gorn commander, played by Ted Cassidy, or provided by Ted Cassidy, will ring more melodramatic than menacing in the ears of today's jaded and desensitized television audience. But if you can watch this episode from within the context of the 1960s, Arena remains exciting, stirring, memorable, and poignant. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and get into the episode here. So, the Enterprise is in orbit around a planet called Cestus 3, which is a planet on the fringes of known space where there is a remote outpost located. And they receive a message from the commander of the outpost, Commodore Travers, asking them to bring down their tactical personnel with them as he has a problem to present to them. Kirk agrees and says they will beam down immediately. So they beam down to find that the outpost has been completely destroyed. Kind of odd since their it's like, wouldn't their sensors have picked this up? Wouldn't they have noticed that this place has been destroyed? Kind of odd that they didn't pick that up before. And let's see, the damage looks to have been done days ago, and they guess that the messages they've been receiving from Cestus 3 were faked somehow. So they find a survivor, and Bones begins to treat him. Spock detects more life signs but notes that they are not human. Kirk tells a red shirt named O'Herlihy to investigate, and he promptly gets disintegrated. Then they begin to get shelled with some sort of artillery rounds, similar to mortar fire, causing explosions around them, and they seek cover. Kirk contacts the Enterprise and tells them to beam them up, but Sulu tells them that the Enterprise is under attack as well by an unidentified ship and that they've raised shields so they can't beam the landing party up. They flee to the damaged base to seek shelter, and Kirk tells a crewman named Kelowitz and Lang to return fire on the enemy. Kirk reaches the base's armory and he finds a grenade launcher. Kelowitz arrives and tells them that Lang has been killed. Kirk then uses the grenade launcher, seemingly taking out the enemy. Then Sulu informs Kirk that the enemy ship has broken off its attack and is leaving the system. Kirk and the others beam up, and the Enterprise leaves the system in pursuit of the unknown attackers, who are fleeing into an unexplored region of the galaxy. They question the lieutenant that they found on Cestus 3, and he tells them that a ship arrived and attacked the outpost without mercy, killing pretty much everyone, including women and children, and confirms that the attack happened over a day ago. So the message that they received telling them to come to Cestus 3 were faked, apparently to lure the Enterprise into a trap. Kirk reasons that this was done because the Enterprise is the only Federation ship in the region, and with it destroyed, there would be no defense against an invasion force. Spock questions if invasion is really the motive, noting that they don't really know enough about the attackers to draw that conclusion. But Kirk isn't having it. As far as he's concerned, the threat is immediate. The threat is immediate and clear, Mr. Spock. Invasion. And he intends to prevent the enemy ship from reaching its home base. He tells Sulu to overtake the enemy ship and orders the Enterprise to battle stations. Now, on the bridge, Spock suggests that destroying the enemy ship may not be necessary, but Kirk makes it clear he intends to destroy it, and letting them get away would only invite further attacks. Now, as they pursue the attacker increases speed, eventually forcing the Enterprise to warp 8. And then they begin to close on the pursuer. They move in the vicinity of an uncharted system, but the aliens move to avoid it. Then Uhura announces that they're being scanned, but from the uncharted system, not by the enemy ship. Then the enemy ship drops out of warp and comes to a stop. The Enterprise locks phasers on it and closes to attack. But then some unknown force causes the Enterprise to drop out of warp and come to a stop as well. The engines and weapons are all inoperative, but other systems are working as normal. Spock says that the force holding them in place originates from the uncharted system. Kirk says that at that distance it shouldn't be possible. And then they receive a message from the inhabitants of the uncharted system, who announce, "We are the Metrones. Do not attempt to adjust your set. We control the horizontal. We control the vertical." Now, they don't actually say that, but they do tell the Enterprise crew and the aliens on the other ship that they have intruded into the Metron space, and they're going to hold their ships immobile and aren't going to allow them to carry out their mission of violence in their vicinity. So then they say that they're going to transport the captains of both ships to a planet or to a place where they can fight one another one on one, and the survivor will be destroyed along with his ship. And then Kirk disappears. And then Kirk comes to face with this guy, the Gorn captain. And we see that the Gorns are a race of reptilian aliens. The Gorn attacks Kirk, and it becomes clear that while the Gorn is immensely strong, he is also very slow, and Kirk is able to escape from him. He hits the Gorn with a large rock to no effect, and then the Gorn throws a freaking boulder at Kirk. Kirk, not being stupid, runs for his life. Kirk and the Gorn, hold on, let me bring this up. Okay, so Kirk and the Gorn are provided recording devices to chronicle their battle. Kirk begins making log entries, not realizing that the Gorn can hear everything he says. Kirk recalls that the Metrons said there would be materials on the planet to kill his opponent, but the place is just scrubland with very little in the way of resources. Now, on the Enterprise, the crew tries to find a way to counteract the force keeping them powerless, but has no success. And Spock informs McCoy that all they can do is wait. Kirk notes that the planet has a wealth of precious gemstones, including diamonds, but none of them are large enough to be useful as a weapon. He comes to a cliff and sees the Gorn below, and then notices a boulder at the edge of the cliff and pushes it over the edge. It lands on the Gorn, maybe killing him, but when Kirk approaches, the Gorn awakens, apparently not seriously hurt. Kirk retreats, but then runs into a trap set by the Gorn, causing a boulder to fall on Kirk and injuring his leg and trapping him. The Gorn approaches and makes one of the most pathetic attempts at stabbing someone you'll ever see. Kirk literally just kind of rolls out of the way, then gets up and runs off. Kirk discovers a deposit of sulfur, and he recalls that there is something about sulfur that could be useful, but he can't remember what it is. The Enterprise is then contacted by the Metrons, who say that Kirk is a total wuss and is about to be killed by the Gorn. They announce that they will allow the crew to witness the events between Kirk and the Gorns so that they can better prepare themselves for his impending death. And they see the Gorn and Kirk. Kirk finds another mineral deposit that Spock identifies as potassium nitrate. And how he can know it's potassium nitrate, I don't know. Since, I mean, there's several elements or substances, chemical compounds that are white and powdery. So how he could immediately know it's potassium nitrate, I don't know. Hail, Lord Thoth. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for stopping by, as always. And yes, I do agree this is a great episode. As I said at the beginning, this is one of my absolute favorites because this is the first episode of Star Trek I ever saw. Kirk also seems to realize what the substance is, and he smiles. Then Kirk is contacted by the Gorn through the recording device. The Gorn tells Kirk that he will make Kirk's death quick and merciful if he agrees to wait for the Gorn to come to him. And of course, Kirk asks, "You mean like you were at Cestus 3?" And the Gorn declares that that the Gorn have laid claim to that system for some time, and that the humans on Cestus 3 were invaders. Spock and McCoy discuss if that is indeed true, and if the Gorns felt they were simply defending themselves. Yeah, 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 that whole thing. Where was it? Okay. So meanwhile, Kirk finds a large piece of bamboo and some cordage, and then he begins gathering several minerals, such as the potassium nitrate, sulfur, coal, as well as some of the diamonds that he saw earlier. And Kirk informs the rest of the crew that the materials Kirk has gathered form the basic components of gunpowder. Kirk uses the diamonds to smash the coal and break it down, and then mix it with the sulfur and potassium to make the gunpowder, and then places the diamonds in to serve as projectiles. Then he uses a stone and the recording device to make a spark and light a piece of his uniform, which will serve as the fuse to ignite the gunpowder. And just as the Gorn is approaching him, he's able to ignite it and uses this makeshift cannon to shoot the Gorn. It works, and the Gorn is left helpless and injured. Kirk prepares to kill him, but then refuses to do so, telling the Metrons, "No, I won't kill him. You'll have to get your entertainment somewhere else." Then the Gorn disappears, and this Metron appears. I'm guessing this Metron probably identifies as a they, them, or a Z-Zer or something like that, and tells Kirk that by sparing the Gorn's life, he has shown the Metrons that humans aren't all just a bunch of savages, and therefore they won't be destroyed. Yeah, yeah, this is actually a woman. It's actually a woman playing this part. And then they dubbed in a man's voice. I'll talk about that here shortly. It's a similar thing they did with the Telosians. The Telosians were played by females as well. Okay, so the Metron asks Kirk if he wants the Gorn destroyed, but Kirk says, "No, maybe we can talk and reach an agreement." And the Metron says that perhaps in a few thousand years, they and humans can reach an agreement as well. And then the Metron returns Kirk to the Enterprise. Now, Spock comments that after the cannon went off, they lost contact, and he asks Kirk what exactly happened. And Kirk says, "We are a highly promising species, Mr. Spock. Did you know that?" And Spock says, "I have frequently had my doubts." And Kirk says, "Well, I don't. Not anymore." And it ends there. So, directed by Joseph Pevney from a story by Frederick Brown with a teleplay by Gene Kuhn. An A? Yeah, I will. I'm tempted to give it an A plus because I love this episode so much. But I obviously there are elements of it. The Gorn overall has not aged well. It's very much of its time. It's a guy in a rubber suit with a rubber mask on. Um, but I love it anyway. I don't care. So I'll go ahead and give it an A as well. Definitely. Let's see. And Carol Shellin or Shellin, I don't know how you say it. That's the actress that played the Metron. And Sean Kinney, I'll talk about that in a minute, but Sean Kinney, who played the disfigured Captain Pike in the Menagerie, he played Lieutenant DePaul in this. Let me bring that up. See, let me get an image of him. There he is. Yeah, there he is. That's him right there. So if you wonder what Pike looked like without all that makeup, that's the guy right there. Okay. Let's talk about the director, Joseph Pevney, here for a minute, because he's kind of an important guy himself. So Pevney would go on to direct 14 episodes of Star Trek, and basically tying him with Mark Daniels. They both directed 14 episodes apiece. Now, if you look at the Star Trek seasons, I think the first season is 29 episodes. The second, I think, is 22. And the third is what, 26, I think? I'm not sure. Close to 26. So between them, Mark Daniels and Pevney directed more than a third of the original series episodes. Now, I'm not going to go through the guy's whole background because he's got a ton of credits before he ever got to Star Trek. Um, well, actually, let me go back. Before I get to that, let me start with Gene Coon because he's the one who kind of got this rolling here. And again, I'm reading from Cushman's book. So, Gene Coon, for the first 2 months at Star Trek, had been far too busy rewriting scripts started by others to contribute any original material. By October, he had good reason to believe it would be less work to just write something new rather than to continue to fuss over inherently problematic stories purchased for before the series was even on the air. Coon's story outline for Arena was dashed off and sent to NBC in one day on October 10th, 1966, which was also the day when Roddenberry was out of the office that Coon did his script polish on the menagerie. Coon always dazzled his colleagues with his speed as a writer, and very nearly often by the quality of what came from his typewriter. Robert Justman remembered and often spoke of how Gene Coon wrote the script in a single weekend. Hey, Aladega. Hello, sir. Thanks for stopping by again, as always. Always good to see you. So Robert Justman spoke of how Gene Coon wrote the script in a single weekend. Actually, he did it during the work week. The story outline popped into existence on a Monday and was finished 3 days later on Thursday. As Coon typed fade out, however, the feedback on the outline began flooding in. Stan Robertson's high praise for it came first, but later that same day, the clearance notes from Kellum Research landed on Coon's desk, and then all hell broke loose. Gene Coon's first original story for Star Trek was actually not that original. The producer had apparently forgotten that he had once read a short story by science fiction author Frederick Brown, also titled Arena, first published in Astounding Magazine in 1944. Pete Sloman, an analyst at Kellum DeForest Research, spotted the resemblance immediately, beginning with the title and then followed by a number of similarities in the plot, including aliens attacking an Earth colony, an imminent battle between Earth and the aliens, intervention by a third highly advanced civilization, the instant transportation of an Earthman and an alien unarmed to an asteroid to fight one another, single combat to decide which race survives, and a display of mercy by the Earth captain being the decisive factor in the outcome. As Sloman noted, it is our opinion that Coon's Arena is substantially similar to the copyrighted story by Frederick Brown, and the airing of a screenplay from this outline without purchasing the Brown story could be actionable. Sloman said, quote, "There were occasional ripoffs. I remember that Arena was a ripoff right down to the title, and anybody who knows science fiction knows Frederick Brown's work. It's possible they didn't. It seems to me that few people on Star Trek knew about classic American science fiction, but it would be hard to imagine that case was coincidental. Even so, we had virtually no idea what was going on over at the production office because our job was so specialized and we were insulated from NBC or from the production company or anybody else. So we just got the results of what everybody was freaking out over. And there was a great deal of freaking out. The disclosing of this particular ripoff caused great embarrassment for Coon with his first Star Trek story, which had not only been accepted by NBC but trumpeted by Robertson. Desilu's legal department switched into high gear and contacted Frederick Brown's agent, who then took the matter up with his client. Bijou Trimble, who Gene Roddenberry had befriended at Tricon in September, said, quote, "Fred Brown was very surprised to be contacted by Desilu. He talked to me about it at a science fiction convention. They asked him, quote, 'How would you like to write something for Star Trek?' And he said, 'Well, maybe, but I've never written anything for TV before.' And they said, 'Well, actually, you already have.' Brown was open to the idea, but he wanted to see the script before agreeing to sell the rights to his story. Kuhn's revised script, his second draft, was sent off to be formatted by the Mimeo department. But Kuhn still hadn't figured out a way to address Stan Robertson's criticisms. Let's see. Kuhn tried to simulate the action by adding a voiceover, a sort of extended captain's log, cluing the audience in on Kirk's thinking, his concerns, and how he figures out a way to perhaps win the battle. It was Gene Roddenberry who finally found the means to alternate between Kirk's story and the ones of those left behind on the Enterprise. Roddenberry's memo to Kuhn opened and ended on very positive notes. I like it very much. It is certainly very exciting. Excellent ending. I think it is an excellent draft, very much what the series needs. However, in between the praise were some concerns, including Bob will no doubt have some comments on the cost of providing a ruined colony. We may have to be inventive here. And it was Roddenberry's idea to come up with the recording devices, I believe. Another thing was the body count. So originally, when they were going to beam down to the colony, there were going to be a lot more dead bodies. So the body count was reduced, and the radiation burns on Lieutenant Harold, which were originally going to be much worse, were toned down. And there was also a scene in the episode where Kirk tries to impale the Gorn with a spear, and that was removed. There was also going to be a sequence where Kelowitz and Lang are attacked, and then Lang gets disintegrated like O'Hurley did, but that was also taken out for cost reasons. So we just have Kelowitz telling Kirk, they got Lang, sir. These changes, among others, constituted Kuhn's final draft from October 28th. He had wanted to make an impression on Frederick Brown. Brown liked what he read, and a deal was made on November 2nd, giving the sci-fi author both money and a screen credit for the story. Later that day, more notes arrived from the fastidious Kellum DeForest research, and this meant more changes to Kuhn's script. Regarding the two space vessels being forced to suddenly stop, DeForest research said, the stresses of a sudden stop in space from warp speed would cause the ship to disintegrate. Any object inside the ship that was not a part of the structure, including the crewmen, would continue moving forward at warp speed right through the hull. These are the impossible things that should be commented on. Concerning Kirk's makeshift cannon, described in the script as a hollow shaft about 3 feet long, with Kirk thrashing his arm down on it, DeForest wrote, it would be difficult for Shatner to get his arm down a tube of this size. I suggest he poke inside it with another stick. That this primitive cannon would fire and not explode would be more believable if Kirk did something to strengthen the bamboo tube, either binding sticks to the outside or slipping two pieces together or inside the other. There would be more notes, many pages worth, not uncommon from DeForest research. Kuhn went along with the ideas about the cannon. He had Kirk wrap it in vines to help shore up the makeshift weapon. And then he had the cannon blow up anyway, knocking Kirk back and momentarily stunning him as it sends out a blast of diamond missiles into the Gorn. But Kuhn wasn't going to lose his sudden stop in space. Sulu reports the situation, saying, it's impossible. As far as Kuhn was concerned, that was enough impossible for us to understand and accomplish, but not so for the Metrones. Two sets of pages of revisions soon followed as Arena sped towards production, passing by many other scripts which had been in development for months. This was the shortest trip that any episode in the series had taken from outline to final shooting script, and the results were outstanding. Under Gene Kuhn's guidance, Star Trek was rapidly becoming faster paced. Kuhn felt that Star Trek could remain adult and at the same time be a bit more fun. Care, however, was still taken to keep the series believable. To this end, it was agreed among the creative staff that the Gorn would not speak English. Instead, to honor a suggestion made by Roddenberry, yeah, here it is, a translator device was introduced to allow the two combatants to communicate. Arena is notable as the first episode to refer to Earth's space alliance as the Federation, which was a contribution from Kuhn. So it was Kuhn who came up with the Federation, not Roddenberry. The script for the upcoming A Taste of Armageddon, having been around for a while and going through various revisions by Kuhn, would be more specific, identifying the alliance as the United Federation of Planets. Arena was also the first episode to introduce photon torpedoes, another Kuhn invention. Okay, so now we'll talk about Joseph Pevney. So Joseph Pevney was an actor turned director, Robert Justman shared. Some former actors became good directors, some actors became directorial hacks. Pevney was the former. So we'll talk about Pevney for a minute here. Pevney was brought to Star Trek by Gene Kuhn, who knew him from when they both worked at Universal Studios. Pevney, like Daniels, began as a stage actor in New York. What he really wanted to do, though, was direct, and he got the chance in 1942 with a musical review on Broadway called Let Freedom Sing. Pevney returned to acting on Broadway with a plum role in Counselor at Law starring Paul Muni. When the play closed, he went off to fight World War II in the Army Signal Corps, where he staged performances and stage reviews for the troops. By 1946, Pevney was back on Broadway in a Home of the Brave for a prominent role as a shell-shocked soldier. Variety said, quote, the play, well written by an ex-GI, has several ex-GIs in the cast, notably its leads, Joseph Pevney and Alan Baxter, so it carries a great deal of conviction. Pevney was praised for showing restrained poignancy. Pevney's first directorial assignment was Shakedown, a movie starring Howard Duff, released in 1950. Daily Variety took note of the fine direction of Pevney. 2 months later, the same trade stated that Undercover Girl, his second film, was directed at a fast and suspenseful pace. Universal International put out 4 more of Pevney's movies in 1951, a pace that taught the director to shoot film fast enough for television. Let's see. The studio, now trusting its young director with higher priced properties, promoted him to handling movies designed to top a double bill. Pevney's sixth picture, The Strange Doors, starred Charles Laughton and Boris Karloff and introduced him to the horror genre. Universal squeezed 5 movies out of Pevney in 1952. The first, and a clear step up, was Meet Danny Wilson, starring Frank Sinatra. Daily Variety called it bright drama with comedy and songs, aided by slick and fast direction. Okay, I'll skip ahead here. Just prior to Kuhn's invitation to join Star Trek, Pevney directed a slew of TV shows, including episodes of Gunsmoke, The Big Valley, Bewitched, 12 O'Clock High, Pistols and Petticoats. I've never heard of that one. And The Legend of Jesse James, including an episode that featured Jeffrey Hunter. Pevney also stopped off at The Fugitive with guest player Arlene Martell, who would then be appearing in the Star Trek episode Amok Time. And also an episode of T.H.E. Cat, where he met a visiting Theodore Mark Hughes, who would remember him for a standout role in Star Trek's Cat's Paw. During his career, Pevney directed countless movie stars, and I'm not even going to name them all, but there's a lot. And a lot of great TV stars of the time as well. Okay, Bill Blackburn, one of the men to take a turn inside the Gorn suit, said, my favorite director, who I absolutely adored, was Joseph Pevney. He was outgoing and kind of typical old show business. He was fun, and he didn't yell a lot. Jerry Finnerman, who was the Star Trek director of photography, had great respect and fondness for Pevney as well, but his first impression and the beginning of their association was not good. Finnerman said, "The first time I met Joe, he just said to me in front of everybody, quote, 'How fast are you?' And I said, 'Well, I don't know.' And he said, 'Well, I'm fast, and we're going to get this show done on schedule.' Like the cameraman is holding it up or something. Okay, I thought, I'm going to get this son of a bitch." Ted Cassidy, who was hired to provide the voice of the Gorn, had also been the voice of Baylock's alter ego in the Corbomite maneuver, and also appeared in What Little Girls Are Made Of as Ruck. And he would also do the voiceover for the credits on the Incredible Hulk show as well. Vic Perrin provided the voice for the Metrone. This was his first job with Star Trek, although many sources wrongly credit him as being involved in 2 previous episodes. Gene Kuhn and Joe Agosta knew exactly who they wanted to voice the Metrone. Perrin, who provided the control voice from The Outer Limits. Perrin later returned to do more voiceover work for Star Trek in The Changeling, doing the voice of Nomad, and also appeared on camera in Mirror Mirror. Okay. Carol Shellen played the boyish looking Metrone. And let's go and bring her up here. She was working regularly on Shindig. I'm not sure what that show was, and followed this with a recurring role on Fanny as Fanny on Here Comes the Brides. Star Trek had cast a woman to play an alien man before in The Cage, looping in a male voice, and it worked again here. Jerry Ayers, 30, played Ensign O'Herlihy. So let me bring him up here. Oh, there he is getting zapped. He's the crewman in the red shirt who dies on the planet from a disintegration beam. He would also be resurrected to play Ensign Rizzo in Obsession, where he would again don a red shirt and again be killed. Grant Woods played Kelowitz. I can bring him up here. There he is. This was his second of 3 episodes. Woods and his character Kelowitz had already been seen in the Galileo 7, and he would appear again in This Side of Paradise. Tom Troop, at 38, played Lieutenant Harold, and he's the injured guy they find. The book doesn't really mention who played Lang. This guy right here, they don't talk about him for some reason. Um, he's the sole survivor of the attack on Cestus 3. Troop worked often on television. He had played doctors on episodes of Ben Casey, Dr. Kildare, and The Fugitive, as well as playing a medic on Combat. Sean Kinney, and let me bring him up. There he is. Sean Kinney, who resembled Jeffrey Hunter enough to win the role as the crippled Captain Pike in the Menagerie, made his first of 2 appearances as Lieutenant DePaul. He would return again in A Taste for Armageddon. Hua Chang, who was responsible for the monsters on The Outer Limits, would design the Gorn costume. Stuntman Bobby Clark began his relationship with Star Trek here as the man who spent most of the time in the Gorn suit. Although he would be alternated with another stuntman called Gary Combs, with a third man, Bill Blackburn, taking a few brief turns to get pickup shots. So altogether, there were three different guys in the Gorn suit. Of the casting, Joe Pevney said, I talked Roddenberry into using a stuntman. An actor would have been worn out and nothing flat, and I would not have been able to get enough footage without building a fan into the suit. I said, we'd better get a guy who's accustomed to roughing it out there, somebody who would be able to go without water for the length of time in order to get enough footage, or would be stopping all the time to allow someone to put the suit on and take it off and over and over and over. Bobby Clark remembered, Joe Pevney called me and he says, Bobby, I've got a job for you. Are you busy? And I said, no, I'm just here working on my ranch. And he said, good. It's really a nice part. You won't have a lot of dialogue in it, but it requires some physical stuff that I know you're capable of doing. So I want you to go to Desilu and go to the wardrobe man, and he'll get you into costume. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do in this? And he said, I don't have time to tell you right now. Just go and get into your wardrobe. And I don't have time to explain. Just, just go see him. And that was it. So I go to Desilu and go to wardrobe, and I said, I'm Bobby Clark. I'm here for a fitting for Star Trek, whatever that is. And the guy says, okay, yeah, we're expecting you. Go into dressing room, whatever number it was. So I go in there, and there's a curtain to close behind me. And there's a rack, which is supposed to have my wardrobe on it. And there's all this weird stuff piled on it, but nothing that I can see that I'm supposed to put on. So I yelled out, hey, there's no wardrobe in here for me. And the guy yelled back, it should be in there, Bobby. And I said, there's no wardrobe. And he said, so he comes in and he points to the stuff on the rack and says, that's your wardrobe. And I said, oh my God, what is that? And he said, it says here on our call sheet that you're playing the Gorn. And I said, the Gorn? What's a Gorn? And he said, it's that thing in front of you. Well, how was I to know? I'd never watched Star Trek. I'd watched the shows I was doing, which were Westerns. So I put it on, which was no easy thing. It was all rubber. It was a base wetsuit, and then they put all those muscles and stuff on top of it. And then the gauntlets for the hands and the big feet on top of tennis shoes. The feet were maybe 16, 17 inches long. And then a tunic went over that and the hood over that. If I wanted to see down, I'd have to lower my head because I could only see what was right in front of me. Well, I suppose that's why Joe didn't have to come out and tell me what the part was. Okay, Pevney, having been offered a $500 bonus if he could stay on schedule and finish the demanding episode in just 6 days, was determined to hit the ground running. And this resulted in him bruising Jerry Finnerman's ego when he told the young cinematographer in front of his whole crew that this episode would stay on schedule and that the camera lighting department was not going to slow things down. Bobby Clark said, I worked with Joe on Westerns before then, and Joe and I got along very well, but he could get a little nasty with the cameraman if he wasn't getting what he wanted. As Finnerman and Pevney were figuring out how not to push each other's buttons, Sean Kennedy was cautiously pushing some buttons of his own. Stationed at the helm as Lieutenant DePaul, Kennedy recalled, when I sat at the console and pressed the buttons, sometimes they would heat up and get so hot that my fingers would get stuck to the melting plastic. This was in the days before low voltage bulbs. I couldn't yell out. I would just have to pull my fingers off as quickly as I could and hope the camera didn't pick it up. Let's see. Clark had been given instructions about how to approach his role, and they had nothing to do with acting. He remembered, after I had my fitting a couple of days before the shoot, I got a call from the wardrobe guy, and he says, Bobby, do you drink a lot of coffee? And I said, no, I don't drink a lot of it. And he said, good, just drink a little bit, not a lot. If you can, we'd appreciate it if you could go to the bathroom before you get into the suit. We'd rather not take you out any sooner than we have to. They told me this because the bottom part of the wetsuit came up to my rib cage and there were no zippers. And I had to put cornstarch on my bottom to get into the suit. You can imagine what it was like to have to pee. Being in November, it was nippy out at Vasquez Rocks, and Shatner wore thermal underwear under his costume. If you look closely, you can see the sleeves of the long johns peeking through the sleeves of his Federation uniform. Let's take a look at that. Let me see if I can see. I don't see any there. Yeah. I mean, I don't see any. Huh. Okay. Um, okay. The men who took turns inside the thick rubbered hide of the Gorn did not find the climate to be so cool. Bobby Clark said, "We started very early in the morning and we worked until the sun went down. And you figure you have about 3.5 to 4 inches of rubber on top of the wetsuit. So, yes, it was very hot. Not excruciating because the director would call us in when he was ready to shoot. Then we'd put the head back on, zip up the tunic, and then I'd go down and do whatever I had to do for the shot. And as soon as he gets the shot and says cut, then I would walk away and go to what I would call my perch, where I had to stand on this tilted ladder because I couldn't sit down. But then the wardrobe man would take the head off and unzip the tunic. As for makeup, I did have makeup. I had makeup all around my mouth and my nose and that whole area because when the Gorn made his arg noises, the mouth would open up and you could see in, and they had to paint my face black. Clark had an alternate, Gary Combs, a young stuntman who was temporarily out of work due to injury and had been given some of the less demanding shots in the rubber suit as a favor from Pevney. Bill Blackburn, one of Star Trek's most visible extras, went invisible this time. He says, "What I loved about Star Trek was that every time I went to work, I never knew what I was going to do. If I wasn't going to be on the bridge, then I'd be doing something else, like playing the Gorn. I didn't do the stunts, I just did the close up shots." Shatner's stunt doubles for the flips and falls was Dick Dial. Bobby Clark said, "I'd stay in that rubber costume from morning until lunch. I could take the top off at lunch, but I couldn't take the bottom off. It'd be too rough to get back into it. When I had to relieve myself, the hardest part was getting up to the honey wagon and going up those steps with those big feet on. And then when you get in and try to close the door, the feet were too big. And there was no fly on that suit. I'd have to go in there and pull the bottom part, all fitted, all rubber from the rib cage down to here, just enough so I could pee. Then I'd have to go back to the set. Fortunately, I had a stand in, Blackburn, who was there while they planned the shots and lit the shots. I could rest during those times in the shade with the head off against my ladder. And when they were ready to shoot, I'd come down and do my spot, and the director would tell me, "All right, in this shot, Bobby, is going to consist of you coming after Kirk because you're moving very slowly because you're reptilian." Of his sparring partner, Clark said, "Shatner's always good to work with. He had done a lot of other things before Star Trek, so he knew what he was doing. But I'm not a bona fide actor, I'm a stuntman, so I'm doing physical stuff with him, not lines of dialogue. And we got those scenes shot pretty fast. We'd talk. We weren't pals, but we would talk. I give him credit. The man worked very hard." Okay, now the fort at Cestus 3, located at the foot of the jagged rocks. Let me uh, let me bring that up. Huh? Come on. Oh, okay, it's the wrong one. Hold on here. There we go. Uh, see if I can get it. There we go. That was a good shot of it. Okay, so this fort set here, was originally built by Screen Gems in the mid 1950s. for a television series called Tales of the 77th Bengal Lancers, which I've never heard of, which followed the exploits of a British cavalry unit stationed in 19th century India. The set was built for the staggering cost of $117,843, which in 1956, of course, was bought a lot more than it did today. Eddie Paskey said, anytime you go on location, it's hard, but for me, Vasquez Rocks was a treat. I mean, here I am in the middle of a set that's history. And Vasquez Rocks, where I saw Roy Rogers and Gene Autry riding on TV, and which I remembered from Death Valley days back when I was watching as a boy. You kind of get taken up with all the history, and I'm thinking, I'm part of this now. I've been here with these people. Okay. Oh yeah. So Shatner and Nimoy, and let me get a if I can get a good shot here. So there's a sequence where Shatner's running through these explosions, and I don't think I have a shot of it, but Spock does it as well. And as a result of this, apparently Shatner and Nimoy got too close to the charges, or the charges were too powerful, or something. But as a result of this, both Shatner and Nimoy developed tinnitus, or ringing in their ears, which they would have for I don't know if they had it for good or if it was just temporary. Also, Arena introduced a sound effect that would be used often in Star Trek. Sound editing supervisor Jack Finley said the photon torpedo sound, that twang that came from War of the Worlds and was obtained by striking a length of cable. This was used with another effect over to create a popping type of sound. And if I remember right, it's the same basic method that they used in Star Wars to create the blaster sounds as well. They would take a taut length of metal cable and strike it with a wrench or some other piece of metal. Woohoo, go boom. Yeah, a little too much, unfortunately. Okay, the budget for this ambitious episode was set higher by the producers than the norm at $197,086. As a reward for getting it all done in 6 days, Joseph Pevney was paid his $500 bonus. So this aired on January 19th, 1967. And then there was a repeat broadcast on July 6th, 1967. When it aired in the initial airing, it was second. The first half hour of the show was second in its time slot with a 26.6 audience share. Uh, Far behind Bewitched, which had a nearly 48%, or I'm sorry, 38.9% audience share. And then the second half hour was also second in its time slot with a 31.6 share, just 1 point behind the Thursday night movie. Arena is considered a Star Trek classic. In the December 1991 issue of Cinefantastique, writer-critic Thomas Doherty picked Arena as the fourth best episode from the original series. And a footnote about the foothills. Let me see here. Because, of course, this set, Vasquez Rocks, has become kind of famous among Star Trek fans because of this episode, of course. And it's been used, I think, for other episodes. Like I say, it was the same area was used for Shore Leave, and it'll be used again later on. It's what Vasquez Rocks kind of was like served the same purpose as that rock quarry did on the old Doctor Who show and Blake Seven, where every week they would be in this rock quarry. Okay, so a footnote about the foothills. 6 years after this production, the state of California acquired Vasquez Rocks from Rob Helfer, who also owned this property, and designated it a public park. Concerned that the crumbling structures and high walls of the fort set might pose a risk to park visitors, it was demolished. And yeah, and if you'll recall, this guy Ralph Helfer, he owned Vasquez Rocks, and he also owned, I forget the name of it, but he owned that animal preserve or nature preserve where Shore Leave was filmed. And a few years after those episodes, and this episode too, were filmed, I think it was around 69, something like that. There were some really heavy rains that caused flooding on the nature preserve. And as a result, it was kind of ruined and wasn't really good for filming anymore. And I don't know what happened. It's set, I think, just kind of vacant or unused for like 20 years. And then I think it was Tippy Hedren. Tippy Hedren purchased that property and used it as a nature preserve again. Okay, and one final little factoid here. William Shatner complained there was one show, I've forgotten the name of it, which somebody said to the director, if you bring the show in 5 days, you'll get a $500 bonus. It was a show I was mostly alone in. I did 14 pages of dialogue in one day. The average was 9 or 10 pages, but I did 14. The show came in on time, and the director got his $500 bonus. But I didn't even get a thank you. Okay, so I'll go ahead and wrap it up here. I will not be doing a Trek Talk next week because I've got my National Guard drill this weekend. And then I've also got some important things to take care of early next week, which I have to put into next week because I can't do it over the weekend. So I'm not going to have time really to get this ready. So in 2 weeks, I'll come back and I will be doing episode 20 in production order, which is the alternative factor. Yeah, not not one of the better episodes, but we got to cover it. So yeah, I'll be doing that in 2 weeks. So until then, thank you to everyone who showed up during the stream. Please do like the stream before you go and sub to the channel if you haven't already, and check out some of my other videos while you're here. And I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching.